Good evening, one and all. In today's lecture, we are going to discuss about the concept of servlets in Java, using which dynamic web pages can be created. This is a new topic for the new week that we have today. Okay, so we'll start with what is servlets and all, and then in between, I'll also inform you about the group or individual project that you can make. So basically, when we have to retrieve something from a server, that is, if we want to access some website, we need to have access to the server actually. So how it works is, you have a particular client. Client means your computer, your machine, you yourself are the client. That is this part, client. He will make a request to access a certain web page or a website. Website consists of multiple web pages. Okay, so in a website, a particular web page he may want to request. So that request is, if it is following HTTP protocol, that is hypertext transfer protocol, then it is an HTTP request which goes to the server. Now server is the person or the machine which is again a normal computer only, but with certain functionalities, and it is dedicated to serve the requests coming from clients. So on the server, what you have is all the web pages like HTML pages, all your CSS files, then maybe some JavaScript files, all those other files that are required in order to create a website or a web page. So a number of technologies are combined and the files are integrated, they are linked to each other to form a website. You have different technologies like and frameworks like React, Angular, use PHP, Java as the backend. There are so many things. All those resources, the image files, the audio, video that you see in the website, all those things are there on the server. And from there, if it is possible to serve the request that a client is making, whatever client wants to access, if it is available on that server, then that server will serve your request. That is, he will respond to your request. So that response will come in the form of whatever you have requested. If you have requested for a HTML page, that response that will come to you is an HTML page which you have requested for. Whatever request, if it is possible, server will send that as a response. So that response is sent from the server to the client. So this is how basically how you access the websites, because websites are not stored on your own local machine. You have to access them by requesting someone, and that person will respond to you. So this is about the request response model, or you can say client server architecture. Now, where does servlet come into picture? Servlet or Java is actually at the back end, or it means that the logic or how the response must be created, that is done by the servlet. That is at the server side what happens, that is mainly at that end we have the servlet. Now how it works is, suppose you have a client over here. This is a detailed picture of how the servlet is going to work. So you have a client over here and you have a web server. This image is not that clear, but try to make out what is written. So web server is over here. Now the web server, on the web server, there is a particular different components are there at the web server. So the components, whatever components are there, web components, they are available at the web server. One of the web component is a web container. Okay, what is web container? It is a component, a web component at the web server. So whichever HTTP request you're making, means whatever files you want, that will go as a HTTP request to the web server. And then from there, the request will go to a web container. Now this container will have the functionality to hold the servlets. So the web container will actually help you to interact with the servlet. Okay, so your request has now come to the web container. Now this web container will do the task that it will create two objects. You have studied class, object and all that. So it will create two objects. The names of the object are request and response. Now request is an object of which class? It is an object of the HTTP servlet request class. There's a class whose name is HTTP servlet request. Similarly, there's another class whose name is HTTP servlet response. Okay, so these two classes, two objects are created, and using these objects, we'll be able to interact. Now, using these two objects, also there is one thread that is created. That is a process, a lightweight process, and this process will in turn invoke two methods. Means it will call two methods. Which two methods? It will call a single method actually, that is called service, and this service intern will call different methods like do get, do post, and there are different methods. Here I've shown only do get method. So depending on the method of accessing or the method of which you're going to access means it may be either get method or it may be a post method. There's a difference which you can understand in these two methods by looking at the URL of a website. So if it is a get method, in the URL there'll be some changes. If it is a post method, there'll be some changes. So depending on which method, either it is post or get, accordingly, you will call either do post or do get method. So these methods will be called, okay, these methods will be called so that in these methods, whatever logic is there, that will get implemented. And when that logic is implemented or when that logic is called, the particular response, maybe an HTML file will be created. And this as a response will be sent back to the web container, and from the web container back to the web server, and from the web server back to the client. So what happens here? Client requests something. From the server, it goes to the web container, which is a component on the web server. The web container will create two objects, and a thread will use these two objects to invoke a service method. The service method in turn will invoke different methods like do, get, do, post, and other methods. Finally, some logic will be executed to create a response page, which will go back to the container, back to the server, and then finally to you. So basically what we have seen in the previous image was client and server. Now at the servlets work. How? Using this diagram I've explained. Okay, so this is one way in which the data can be accessed. Now suppose you're not using servlets, you're using some database, or maybe you're using servlet as well as database. Now in database, how it will work? Web server has to communicate to the database through the database management system. So you have client, request goes to web server will access the DBMS will access the database, and from the database, whatever records it wants will be given to the web server through the DBMS, and from the web server to the client. So it depends on what you want to access, how you want to access, which technology you're using, and all that. So is it clear how it is accessing, how it happens internally? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay, so this is actually a theory point. You may or may not remember it, but it's good to remember. And then there is a servlet life cycle as well. So how this servlet will actually work means there are certain methods that are called in order to execute this entire process, which I showed you in this image. Those methods are, means that process involves, first of all, the servlet is a class actually. Servlet is a class. It is loaded in the memory. Wherever the server is also a machine. It has certain memory and all. So the servlet is loaded over there. Now the servlet is loaded over there. That time you have servlet instances. Once the servlet class is loaded, servlet instance means what? Object of the servlet class. Servlet instance means object of the servlet class. So these objects are created. Okay. Now the init method is invoked. We know that if we are dealing with classes objects, there are certain methods like init method. Init method is invoked whenever object is created. Like how you have your constructor, that there is a particular init method also that is invoked whenever the object is created. Now what will happen? It will do some tasks which we'll see in the next image. After the init method, you'll have a service method also, which is called. And this service method we have seen here, right? This service method that I showed you. This service method in turn will call certain methods like do, get, do, post. So that service method is also called. And finally, after the tasks are over, means servlet is no longer required. So whatever memory was allocated or whatever was utilized of the CPU, whatever resources, all those will be destroyed. Means the servlet will be destroyed. So first of all, the servlet class means the servlet concept, it is loaded. Then it is instantiated. Instantiated means you're creating objects of the servlet class. And then you can have an init method. Then you have a service method and destroy method. Was loading, object creation. Then you have init method. After init method, service method. After service method, destroy method. And remember that init method is used to initialize some things and all that. And destroy method is used for cleaning the resources. So they'll be called only once. Initially init method and finally destroy method. And in between, service method can be called any number of times. It depends on how many requests the client is making. Because service is used to serve the requests. So if client is using or firing 100 requests, 100 times the service method will get called. Now what happens actually in all these steps is loading the servlet class means it is loaded, and when it happens, when the first request is sent to the server, when it is received by the web container, whenever the first request is made by the client, that time it is loaded. Then object creation or instance creation means the web container will create the object of the servlet class, or you can say it is a servlet instance. And it is created only once in the entire life cycle. This between all these 5 steps, only once this step is done, creating the object. Then init method will do what? It will initialize the servlet. It will initialize the servlet means it will do the preparation to call the service method and other methods. Some preparation needs to be made. Initialization has to be done. That will be done. Service method, it will in turn use the objects like request and response are two objects that are created over here. Request response object. Those two objects will be used by this service method. As you can see here, the prototype, the declaration is here, request and response. These two objects are there. And you have to do certain exception handling, like if the connection is not possible, if server is down, if the input output logic is not implemented properly. So exception handling must be done. And then destroy method. What it will do, it will remove the instance that you created of the servlet and clean up activity so that resources are used for the next activity. Okay, so this is actually theoretical. When we go to the programs, you'll understand better. So till now it is clear what is servlet and why it is used. It is basically used to handle the Java implementation at the server side. Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Now see the program, it will definitely get clear for you. Before that, you need to install Java Enterprise Edition. We know that there are 3 editions, like basically what we have been using till now was the standard edition. Then we have an enterprise edition, and then we have a edition for the mobile app development. So now we have to use the enterprise edition to develop the websites and all that enterprise level, not your basic programming. This is a web application, so enterprise level. Now when you do it, you have certain perspectives and all, which is there in the video which I've shared. So after installing this, which I've shown in the process that I've given you the screenshots for that. After that, when you're installing Tomcat, go to this link, okay? In that file, there may be some other link or some other thing, but actually when I tried it, it was not compatible with your Java version. Okay, so preferably, because now recently Tomcat version 10, Tomcat is a server. Like till now we are discussing client and server. They were on 2 different machines. Client means your machine, server means some remote machine, somewhere else it is. But if we are in the testing phase, you are developing the website, it may not be possible to store all those files and all on some other machine, and then you may have to use 2 machines in that case, right? One is for requesting and one is for responding. But in your testing phase, you will have to use a single machine. It is not feasible to use 2 machines. Everyone does not have 2 machines. So that time you can have the client as well as the server on the same machine. That time when you have the server on the same machine, to have those capabilities, you need something called as Apache Tomcat server. And it also is a software actually, which will help you to serve the requests that you yourself are making. So use version 9.0.56, I guess, 9.0. That is stable version. It is Tomcat 10 is sometimes it gives you errors. It is not supporting certain Java X files and all. So you go for Tomcat version 9 and you use this link. This link I'm putting in the chat box. Someone put it on the group. Okay. Last time I told you to put on the group, but no one put it. Anyways, put it on the group, someone, and you have to install this Tomcat. Now, how to install that video also I'll share it with you. Okay. So once you install it, what will happen is you're ready, and you have to configure the server. Means Eclipse and the server Tomcat has to be linked to each other. Once it is linked, you'll get to see Tomcat v9, means version 9 over here. Okay. And you may have to change the port number and all. I've already explained why we need ports and all. That is also explained in the video, so don't worry. Now, first of all, in your web application, basic thing what you need in your web applications, which thing you need? You need HTML. What is the full form of HTML? Anyone knows?
Hypertext markup language.
Language.
Yes. Okay. So hypertext. Okay, very good. Someone has put the link. Prahlad. Okay, so hypertext markup language is the use. It is used to create the basic structure of your web page. Okay. For example, if I open any web page over here, just any web page, you can right click and click on inspect. You get to see some developer friendly things over here, like the styling that is done by the CSS and the HTML and all. Okay. Now from the head tag, if I head tag is where you include your other files which are going to support your HTML file. Suppose I remove this. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So there was some problem actually. What was the last thing you heard me saying? Yes.
Like you switched to that website page and then your voice was not audible.
Okay, so I was saying that once you remove certain files, that is the style sheet, the JavaScript file, and all that, you get to see the actual HTML layout, which is not that beautiful or presentable. Okay, so basically, for every web project or website, you need a particular in HTML file called as index.html. Usually, they call it index.html file, or you can call that HTML file anything. Basically, the base file or the main home page that is called as index.html. So then these HTML files, first of all, we have to create in our project. So this is the code for that. Now in this thing, what I've done is just for explanation purpose, for demonstration, that you have an HTML tag. Do you know basic HTML? basically means very basics. Do you know about it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
will.
yeah. So basically, I have designed a form over here. No problem. There are certain tags over here, okay, which is understood by the browser. There's no logic or like you have your if else for loop. There's nothing like that. What is the main purpose of HTML is the structuring, the basic skeleton. And there you can specify certain tags like maybe you want a paragraph, you want a particular section, you want a division, you want maybe some input field, some text box. Here also you can have those text, checkbox, radio button, all those things which you have seen in the GUI. Then you can have maybe some headings, means the text you may change the font size. So there are different tags for that. Tags means the tags have certain properties, and those properties can have certain values. For example, if you are using an input tag, then its type may be text, means you want to give certain text. You can have another input field, maybe it is a checkbox. So you have certain input fields, and they may have different types like text or checkbox or radio button or date and time. So such things are possible. And if you want to identify them, like you may have different input fields. All of them may be type text. I hope this font is visible. Actually, I need to change it, but it's not possible now. So this there are two input fields in which you have to enter two numbers actually. So how you will identify which input field is which one, means there should be some ID for that. So the first input field, I've given it a name called as num1, and the second input field, I've given it a name called as num2. So num1 and num2 are the names for these input fields. And then you have a submit field, and if you click on that submit field, you will go to some other page or some other servlet. Okay, so I'll just run this first now. So you can right click, run as, run on server. So it is server starting Apache Tomcat, and you can see I have an internal browser over here. If I don't want this internal browser, I can click on window, web browser, Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, or default, whatever. For now, I'm using internal web browser. If I use Chrome and then I again run this page, then it will open the Chrome browser, as you can see here. Okay, so for now I'm using internal server so that I don't have to switch between my IDE and my browser. Internal web browser I'm using. Now here you can enter two numbers like 2 and 3. These are the input fields. Once you click on submit, you have to go on some other page. Okay, and that page is a servlet. So that is what we have to do here. So first of all, your HTML page, your structure has to be ready. Now, where you have to go when you click on the submit button, that you have to define over here. Try to zoom your screen if it is not visible. Action means to which resource or which URL next you want to go to. When the submit button is clicked, that time whatever is written inside this action attribute, this is an attribute, and its value is add over here. Add means it is the name of my, it is actually the URL of my servlet. URL means the universal resource locator. Your each web page has a particular URL to locate that web page. So my index.html has a particular URL. My servlet will also have a URL and so on. So when the submit button is clicked, I have to go to the URL called as add, and at this URL, I will find my servlet. Now servlet is nothing but it is a Java file only, like how you create your different Java files in which you write factorial program, this program, that program. That servlet is also a Java file only. This is my servlet file. This is the Java file. Okay, this is the file. You can see the Java class, methods, all that are called. And the extension of this file is also .java. Okay, so when I come to this page, I have to execute some logic and display some other page. Okay, now in my index.html file, I have two input fields. Whatever the user enters, I have to take it from those input fields. So he's entering two numbers. I have to get it inside my Java program. That is what we do in our GUI, right? Whatever is entered in the text field, that we are going to capture it inside our Java program file. Do you remember that? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so that is what we have to do now. How you'll do it? Using the unique name of that input field. The field name is what? num1 and num2. So here, first of all, you see that you have a class which extends HTTP servlet. So what is the relation between this class 1 and class HTTP servlet? What is the relation between them? Can you tell me?
It is the subclass of HTTPS.
Yes.
Servlet.
So once you do this, your class 1 is the name of my class. This one class will have the properties of HTTP servlet class, which is already defined. Now in this class, you have the service method, which you have seen in this image. Okay, this service method over here. This service method takes two objects, as I told you, request object and response object. You can call those objects anything. Here I've called them as REQ for request and RES for response. You can call them anything. And these objects are of the type HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response. These are two classes which have two objects respectively. And I told you have to handle the exceptions. So I've used this throws keyword here. IO exception and servlet exception are two classes which will handle the exception, if any. Okay, not necessarily always there'll be exception. If any, it will be handled. Now inside this A and B variables, I'm going to store the user input. The user has inputted some things from the text fields. So it is a request. Why request? Because whatever the user enters, based on that, a request will be fired to the web server. So using a request object, using this request object, I will say dot get parameter and pass the name of that particular input field. Num1 and num2 are the names of those input fields. So get parameter num1, get parameter num2, call it on the request object. And we know that always whatever the user has entered, what is the data type of whatever the user has entered in those text fields? What is the data type over there?
String.
String.
Yes, it is string. Okay, very good. It is string. So we want to perform like addition operation, suppose. Then we have to convert it to integer. That time you can call this method integer as a class on which you have a parse int method. Either you can do it this way, or you have another way in which you can do it is like this also. In brackets, you can write integer and that same method request dot get whatever. You can either do it this way or integer dot parse int. It will convert your string into integer and store it in A and B respectively. Then A plus B will get stored in C. Now you want to write the value of this C variable in another web page, which is done. Actually, it is another servlet. So you have to use another class called as PrintWriter, create its object, and call the getWriter method on the res is the response object. Okay, now the response has been generated, means you want to give the value of C as a response. The value of C you want to give as a response. So on the response object, you'll call this getWriter method. Okay, it will create the object of the PrintWriter class. And now on this object obj, call the println method. You can call this obj anything, out, in, whatever you want. You can call it ABC, whatever. Call println, and you can print a message like sum is equal to plus C. Okay, so you can call this method println, and now when you run this much, actually you get an error, and that error has to be resolved. But first of all, let me run this much and show you that what should happen when you click on submit button. On the submit button, you should get the value of C, which is the addition of the whatever input you have given. So I'm entering 3 and 4, submit, sum is equal to 7. So what actually happened is when you clicked on submit, how do I know where I have to go? I know that because the action is equal to add. Now what this add is and where I've written this add, because in my servlet, you never saw anything called as add over here. So to link this index HTML page and this servlet 1.java file. To link these two files, you need to use a web.xml file. Now, if you open your project hierarchy over here, you can see in your src, in your main, in your web app, in your web.inf file, you have a web.xml file. This is a descriptor file. It will give the description that what should happen when, and it will link the HTML files and the servlets and other things also. So in this file, you have to do certain mapping, or you can say you have to do certain linking. What you have to do here is you have to use again some tags. XML is a semi-structured file. Means in this file, you will have, now there are three types of data. One is structured, one is semi-structured, and one is unstructured. Structured is your SQL that you have seen, your tables, ID, roll number, name, and you have rows and columns in which you have stored the data. Then you have certain thing called as unstructured. Unstructured means your PDF files, your image files, your videos, and all that. And you have semi-structured called as XML files, JSON files, and your NoSQL files. NoSQL means your not only non-relational database. Okay, those files are unstructured. Unstructured means semi-structured. You have structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. Semi-structured means what? It may sometimes act as structured. It may sometimes act as unstructured. You cannot say that it is structured or it is unstructured. It is semi between both of them. Example is XML file. As you can see, here you have certain tags, like how you have in your HTML file. You have form, input. These are called as tags. Servlet is another tag. Servlet mapping is another tag. Okay. Now, ignore this much for now. This is another servlet. This is the second servlet. This is my first servlet. And what is the file in which that servlet is? That file is 1.java. This 1.java is my servlet file. Now in my web.xml file, I have to do the linking. There are two things that you have to do inside your servlet tag. One is servlet name and one is servlet class. Servlet name is any name that you can give, anything. It can be your name or XYZ, ABC. It can be a sentence, anything. But it should be any unique name to identify. And in your servlet mapping also, you have to have the same name. And servlet class means in your 1.java, you have a class called as 1. So that class is in which package? com.company. So to access this particular servlet, you must write com.company.1. 1 is the class name, com.company is the package name. So you have the servlet name and the actual class that is in your servlet file. And again, you in your servlet mapping, you have the servlet name and you have your URL pattern. URL pattern is /add. /add because this add is nothing but the action that you've written over here. Okay, when you click the submit button, which servlet has to be called? That servlet is available at a particular URL, and that URL has a particular pattern, and that pattern is add. This also you can give anything. You can say add, subtract, or ABC, or anything you can call it. Okay, but it should be unique. And this add over here, and in your index file, this add should be same. Okay, so when you click the submit button, action equal to add. So it will search in the web.xml file. Add means which URL it is. It is the URL for the XYZ servlet. And this XYZ servlet has a class called as com.company.1. This one is a class actually, servlet class. So based on the action, which is add action, which is going to have the servlet name as XYZ, and that XYZ servlet is associated with a class called as 1. So this is how it knows that which class and which servlet I need to execute. Is it clear how it comes to know that from the index file, which servlet has to be executed? Is it clear how you come to know it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, this flow control is very important. If any one parameter changes, instead of add, you write AD, then everything will go wrong. You'll get an server error, like 404 error or 504 error, something like that. Internal server errors. everything is correct, only the linking has not done properly. That time you get some errors also. So index file is your structure of your web page. This one file, one.java file, is actually a servlet file in which you have class, object, all that thing. And there you have the actual logic. From there you can create another web page. And how to understand where to go when, using the submit button. You have to go to certain action, and that action will lead you to certain class which is in certain servlet. So this all things you have to do it on your own. Okay, so is this much clear that how it happens and all? Can you confirm? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting different voice for your account again and again whenever you unmute. Why? I don't know why. Okay, so now let's see that this was communication between what? Between an HTML file and between a servlet. And the method that you use to access the data from the HTML page is get parameter. Okay, so remember that whenever HTML page from there you're going to a servlet, you have to use a get parameter method on the request object. Okay, remember this. Get parameter whenever HTML to servlet. Now, you may also want to communicate from one servlet to another servlet. Means what? There may be a situation where you have an HTML page. From there, you go to servlet 1. From servlet 1, you want to go to servlet 2. Okay. So like this, you may want to go from one servlet to another servlet. Now, this technique will not work. If you want to send data from servlet 1 to servlet 2, you cannot use this get parameter method. You have to use a get attribute method. Okay. So for inter-servlet communication, means one servlet to another servlet, you have to use, first of all, you have to say that which data you want to send. You may want to send the data of the C variable, means C, what it stores, the sum of A and B. So you want to store the value of C and you want to send it to the servlet number 2. In that case, this you have to use the set attribute first on the request object. So here in this servlet 1, you will set the attribute, and in servlet 2, you will get the attribute. Here I'm getting the attribute. So in servlet 1, I will set the attribute. How you'll do it? Again, a unique identification called as variable. You can call it anything you can write, a string. And C is what? The variable. Now you have to go from what will happen in this thing? The value of C will get stored, or it will be identified using this variable string. Okay. Now this is done. Now you have to call a method of the request dispatcher class. So create an object of the request dispatcher class, import it. You have to import also. Here I have imported over here. You can see this PrintWriter also you have to import. And this HttpServlet request, all of that I've imported. Okay, it happens automatically. If it doesn't happen, it will give you suggestions. Then also you can import. And this add one is what? It is the URL of the servlet 2. What is the URL of servlet 1? The URL pattern. What did we use as the URL pattern for servlet 1? Can you tell me? For the
Add.
one.java file? Yes, very good. Okay, very good. Used add. Similarly, for the servlet 2, you have another URL pattern called as add one. Okay, add one. So how I know which servlet to go? Using this URL pattern. And when you're going here, at the same time, you have to forward the request and response objects that you have used for your servlet 1. These objects that we have used here in the service method, these two objects will be passed to that second servlet as well. Okay, because using these objects, you can access the data that you have done over here. So these two objects will be forwarded to servlet 2, which I've already created over here. Here also, you have to use your service method, which in turn will call the doGet or doPost. How does it know whether to call the doGet method or how does it know whether to call the doPost method? It knows that based on what you use here. If the method is get, the service method internally will call the doGet method. If the method over here is post, then the server will call the doPost method. And there is some difference between them. We'll see next time. But now you see that here it will happen what? You have to get attribute. In your servlet 1, you use the set attribute and store it in the string, means the string is the identification. And in the servlet 2, using that identification, you're going to get attribute and call it on the request object. Here the request object is called as request. Here request object was called as REQ. You can call it anything. I have simply called it different here. You can call it REQ only here also. You can call it request, REQ, whatever you want you can call, but know that it is a request object. Get attribute, and we know that it is obtained as a string. So here also you have to typecast and store it in a variable. And then using your PrintWriter, you can print the value of that C variable value was what? Whatever the sum was, that got stored in C. That C I have sent over here using this variable string, which has got stored in a variable. And the value of that a variable I'm going to print using this PrintWriter. Okay, so when I run this program, you'll understand that from HTML page, I'm going to servlet 1. From servlet 1, I'm going to servlet 2. But during this transition, when you're going from one page to another servlet, whatever is the intermediate servlet, it will get executed very quickly. Means you can see that here this much we have seen that on the servlet 1, I'm going to display sum equal to C. And then immediately I'm going to servlet 2. So you won't get to see the servlet 1 actually on your web browser, in your window. If you give a delay over here, then you'll get to see it. For now, I'm not giving delay. So when I run this in the internal browser, it will open. And you'll write here 6 and 4, suppose, and click on submit. Value of C variable is 10. In your servlet 2, you have this statement like value of C variable is 10. Okay, so we have got the output at the servlet 2 over here. And you can see that here in the URL over here, this is the URL for this particular servlet. You can see add over here. This indicates that through the servlet 1, because the URL pattern for servlet 1 is what? Add. So using this add, which is for servlet 1, you have come to servlet 2. That is the meaning of this URL over here. Through the add URL pattern, you're coming to servlet 2. Okay, so is this much clear for today? We have seen that from HTML page, you can go to servlet page, and from one servlet, you can go to another servlet. And for the servlet 2.java is the servlet file. This also has to be configured over here in your web.xml. As I said, ignore this, that now don't ignore it. What we have done for your servlet 1, we used XYZ as the name. Here you can use ABC or whatever, anything, but it should be unique. And here what you'll do, here also the class is what? The class is 2, which is servlet. So com.company.2. And the URL pattern is add1. That is why in your servlet 1, from servlet 1, where you have to go to this URL add1. So that URL I have written over here. So this is the linking between servlets or between web page and servlet. Servlet tags and servlet mapping tag. In that you have servlet name and servlet class. Here servlet name and URL pattern. Okay, so is the flow and what is server client is the lecture, today's lecture, is it clear for everyone? Any doubts?
Yes.
If you have any doubts, you can ask me. Put your attendance in the chat box and listen carefully about the project. Now, the project will be based on web application. Okay, it is not based on your normal programming. The application may be whatever list I send you, out of that only you have to do it. There are certain, it is a list of 8 to 7 projects. From that only you have to select a topic and do it. If you have a better idea, you can go with your own idea. But if you don't have an idea, you can select anyone from that, what I send you. Now, You will get 15 days only to do this. You can do it in a group or you can do it individually. But if you're doing it individually, also you'll get 15 days. If you're doing it in a group, also you'll get 15 days, not more. If you take lesser days, it's good, but you won't get more than 15 days. And now only you decide your groups. Maximum 4 members. Okay, not more than 4 members. Okay, maximum 4 members. 1 member, 2 member, 3 member, 4 members are allowed, but not more than that. Decide how you'll do it. Distribute the workload, whatever it is. We'll be seeing the upcoming technologies like JSP and all. Already 2 are over, means one is ongoing. JDBC is over. You can explore in deeper sense also. You can refer other videos on YouTube also if you want to know more about JDBC. And you can see servlets also. I'm taking the session simultaneously. If you want, you can refer other material also, whichever is available. After that, JSP is there, Java server pages. Okay, so these technologies will be going on this week and next week most probably. And simultaneously start designing the HTML page if you know HTML. If you don't know HTML, you can learn basics of HTML. If you don't want to do HTML, preferably do HTML project only, means web application. If you don't want to do, then you can do GUI, which you have seen, AWT, Abstract Window Toolkit. But preferably go for web application because you have lots of time, 15 days. You can study a little bit of HTML and then do it. If you have any doubts of HTML, you can ask me. But I can't be teaching you HTML purely over here. Okay, so start deciding for your groups, because by the end, it should not be that someone is left out or anyone. And those who are not participating in any group, those are not attending the session, though I had informed you that attend it. So if you are left out or if you are not able to submit the project, this whole course will be not of any value for you. You will not get certificate, nothing. Okay, only the videos will be available for you. Okay, so is it clear? Start forming your groups. Start learning, revising all object-oriented concepts. Today I've shown you a little bit of basic of web development, web application. Start configuring your environment with Eclipse and Tomcat server. If you're using NetBeans, it's okay. Okay, and start practicing daily. Whatever I'm showing you today, practice it today only, because tomorrow we'll go to a little bit more advanced concept. Okay, any doubts you can ask me now. If no doubts, you can leave the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Hello, Bhaiya.
Yes.
Like I have a doubt. When like I want to understand the memory allocation system when the server is loaded. So the server is loaded was the first step in the few steps which you shown. So it was I felt like it was dynamic memory allocation. When its work was done, it was destroyed. So
Yes.
is it done in heap area like heap memory allocation, or is it done in some separate memory?
That depends on the server, which architecture you're using. Means the server, if it is purely dedicated to handle the requests only, then it may be a specialized machine where there's a different memory architecture. Maybe the CPU structure, all that may be different, that the programmer or the developer can implement. Or those are providing you the servers. Like if you are hosting a website, you can use GoDaddy or hostinga.com. So there they are providing you the server. It is totally up to them how they're distributing the work and all that. What is your job as a client or as a web developer, that your website should be up and running. It should be accessible to everyone. So there the servlet, if it is a Java file, it also is a program only, in fact. So it may be either heap memory or a stack memory. Whatever local variables are there, like in your servlet, you have a, b, c, d, whatever variables, they may be on the stack, or whichever servlet is getting destroyed. Like if you are using the new keyword anywhere while creating an object, or if this is automatically new by default, then those things may be on the heap. It totally depends on how the server is designed. Not, it is not like let this only it is or let that only.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Any other doubt?
in the HTML web page, you showed like you did some two addition, like 6 + 2 = 8, and then it went to some new page. It showed the answer in some new web page only. Like you,
Yes.
so, is there a method where we can just we can have a go back button? And when we click on that, we will again come back to the first uh, web page
Yes,
where we.
yes. Yes, that is very quite possible. You can do it using HTML also, or if you want to do it between servlets, you can use a logic. You can implement that logic in your Java program, like if something is pressed, go to that URL or something like that. That you can do more efficiently in JSP, that is Java Server Pages. The difference between servlet and JSP is you might have observed in servlet, your structure or design is in the HTML in a separate file, and the logic is in the servlet, which is another file. But in JSP, what happens? You can merge the HTML and the Java together in a single file. So there it is more efficient, or you can say more, it is less time consuming, because here you have to keep on going from one page to another page or file. There everything will be in one file. You can give the URLs. So that is also possible. So you can go between one page and another page. That is possible.
Okay. And like one last doubt, like I have done research on web development thing on different platforms, Google, YouTube, and there I have found that for web development, many of the experts say that you should first learn HTML, then CSS, and then use JavaScript for developing web application. Java is mainly used for app Androids and app development things. So I got a bit confused. Like JavaScript would be more beneficial, or like Java would also do.
See, JavaScript and Python are two very powerful and actually complex languages. They have their own pros and cons. Like whatever technologies you have in Java, not only JSP, servlets, you have something called as Hibernate, Spring Boot. There are so many technologies which may not be that compatible with JavaScript. JavaScript may also have its own very well identified technologies. It may be compatible with React, Angular, all those advanced technologies. But there is another, actually Java here we are using as backend. JavaScript can be used as front end mostly, to have the clicking actions or hovering actions, or changing the size upon user clicking and all. Means after the web page is coming in your browser window, you want to do some changes. There, JavaScript is very efficient. Java is mainly used as backend. There is another language that you can use instead of Java called as PHP. There also you are handling the from the client to the server, that journey you're writing using Java. So it is not that Java is good or JavaScript is good. They have their own pros and cons. They have their own, you can say, role to play, their own responsibility. So if you are learning Java or PHP or anyone or both, it depends on your choice. Some companies may use only Java. They may not allow you to use PHP. Means constraints may be there. So that time it is, you should know most of the technologies. That is why Java can be used as an efficient backend language.
Okay. And
Yeah.
like in second year of like we are in second year in next semester we are gonna have Java. So
Yes.
what is the syllabus of Java over second year? Like what all we have? Like do we have web development also?
No, 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 no. It is, even if you have it, it is just theory. Like within one or two lectures, it may get over. So what you have is actually principles of programming languages. In that subject it comes, and there you have introduction to all the programming languages, like most of them: C, Java, Python. The basic logic, not the syntax. The logic is explained, like COBOL, Angol, Fortran, all those old and new languages, you have it. Then you'll start with Java, basically the syntax of if, else, for, and while, which we have already done. Then you'll have multi-threading. Then you'll have exception handling. Then you'll have a bit of file handling. Then in one unit, you'll have Angular, React, Vue.js, everything clubbed into a single unit. So it's basically very brief, and it's almost like you won't get to learn much of hands-on practice. Okay, so it is expected that you learn that much and you do it on your own. That is why my main intention was to bring this course on Java.
Okay. So and in third year, like what else programming languages do we have to work or make projects on it?
It's totally up to you. You can use the languages which you're being taught in your university syllabus, or if you know C sharp or any other languages, you know machine learning, though it comes in your third year syllabus, machine learning, artificial intelligence, you can use it. It is not restricted like you have to work on this or that. Whatever is there in your syllabus, if you are good at that, then that is appreciated, and you can use the other technologies also. Whatever you want, you can study.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Actually, in this course, what we are means I what we can expect that you are using HTML right now in that form we created. Are we going to add styles to it like we have CSS?
Yes, basics. I'll show you how to add the styles and color and all that, but not much. Like it is mainly focusing on the backend technology.
Okay. So in our projects also we have to not focus on that styles.
Yeah, means if you know it well and good, you can do it. But if you don't know it, you can implement basics or whatever is possible. But mainly focus on the backend.
Okay, actually, I know some HTML and CSS coding, but I do it in VS Code. So, uh, I think some syntax is it different if we use Eclipse or
Um, you can use VS Code. The whatever servlets JSP I'm talking about, they can run in VS Code also. But for Java, Eclipse is preferred. So if you want to design your web page front end, you can do it in VS Code and simply open those files in Eclipse. Okay, you'll do the
okay,
designing front end in VS Code, open them in Eclipse so that you get your back end also in Eclipse as well as the front end that you can try.
okay, okay. Thank you.
Yes, welcome. Any other doubts?
No.
Okay. So I'll end this meeting now. Thank you for joining and learning.
Thank you.